Good evening, everyone. We're going to bring this meeting to a call here. So I want to say welcome to Lorain City School District's Academic Distress Commission meeting. It's a regular meeting on this Wednesday, March 21st, 2018. Roll call.
Mr. Coffin?
Present.
Mr. Monteleone?
Present.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Present.
Mr. Richardson?
Here.
Dr. Solis?
Present.
Great. Moving along, we're going to open it up to public comment. Ms. Rhoda, can you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes, good evening. My name is Rhoda Lee. My address is 1904 West 22nd Street in Lorain. Okay, one of my public comments is that we in the community, particularly our Lorain chapter of the NAACP, are basically concerned and are more concerned about the education of our children and how things are coming. In the board meeting the other day, where the board offered a no confidence vote for our CEO who is here.
Excuse me, when you say board, what?
Lorain City School Board.
Thank you.
And in that, we are here to let you know that we do not agree with that, and we do have confidence in our CEO. He has been out in this community. He has been meeting on a regular basis, having town hall meetings, setting up task force, listening to the community, and discussing what the needs of our children are. And at this point, that is our foremost concern. We are not about all of the other. We want to know, and people want to know what the dividing lines are in terms of the school board, the distress commission, and we understand House Bill 70. And in that, and it does state that the CEO has all the powers and he is utilizing those powers as we see it. And we applaud, and we're proud because he's the first one that we've ever seen and coming here and talking about some of his taxes coming back to our district. Never heard of before. And he is working with the community, working with the parents, and working with the students. And I also would like to let you all know we're very, very proud of our athletic department, our basketball team who's going to the semifinals in Columbus next weekend. We want to discuss that, our robotics over at Longfellow School, and looking at television last week on the news when it came and they listed the surrounding school districts who have had problems with kids bringing weapons to school, violence in the school. Lorain City Schools popped up a 0. And we should let our students know and let our Mr. Montague know that we're very proud, and Mr. Hawks know we're very proud of the way our buildings are maintained, our resource officers, and for the safety of our kids in the Lorain City Schools. And we want you to know, as the Distress Commission, that, you know, we have no problems with our CEO and what he's doing up to this point. If he acts up, Tony, I'll give him a spanking.
That's
okay.
Good. I'm sure you will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? If not, we'll move along to approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Coffin?
Yes.
Mr. Monteleone?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Richardson?
Yes.
And Dr. Solis?
Yes.
So at this time, we're going to turn the meeting over to Mr. Hardy here to give us some updates on the operational, managerial, and instructional side of his work. And I think the commission really wanted to frame the discussion around these particular items because, as you know, under House Bill 70, he has control of those particular areas and functioning of our district. And as a commission, it is our role to make sure that he is being held accountable, that he is transparent. And I think he's done a great job of doing that at his town hall meetings, as well as leveraging the website for our community members to go and engage and learn more about what we're trying to do as a district. And I think this is another platform and venue where we can also share that information. And so, Mr. Hardy, you want to take it away?
Sure. First, thank you all for coming tonight. Happy Wednesday to you all. Good to see you. I'm excited to walk through a number of steps around what we've done over the past few months, and most importantly, again, continue the conversation built around transparency around everything we're doing. So there is a number of lengthy documents that are in front of you, which I'll walk through with you momentarily. And I'm also, to be completely honest, filibustering for a few minutes, so hopefully we can get the PowerPoint up and running so that you can also see what the commission sees in front of them. Before I dive into those pieces, I want to introduce to you all some very important members of our community, of our family, that have joined us and taking on very critical roles to ensure that we're doing everything that we set out to do in our Lorain Promise, and most importantly, what we set out to do for all of our scholars. We have spent the past 4 to 5 months spending a lot of time trying to find the right people to help reshape the way we think about education here in Lorain, and I feel very comfortable and confident and just ecstatic that our leadership team, our senior leadership team, is now here. There are some that have been here, and there's some that are very new to us, so I want to welcome them all the same. Our Chief of Staff will be Elena Gonzalez, who will take up a ton of responsibility of managing a lot of the day-to-day projects throughout our administrative building and tying together all of the projects that you all see on our website or have heard about in our town halls and making sure they're happening on time. So there's a level of accountability that follows with her role, and excited for her to take that on. Our Chief Operations Officer is Mr. Hawks, and he's operating right now. But most importantly, excited for Jeff, who has been a fabric of our community for a very extended period of time in a positive way, and we're excited for him to continue the work, but more importantly, expand beyond just what we think about typical day-to-day operations, which is exciting. Our Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer is Josh Hill. Josh assumed the role of treasurer, but also, given his skill set, stepping into the role of strategy and innovation in a really powerful way. Being this is an office in which we have a strategic plan, we need to make sure someone's following it and keeping us accountable to making sure that's happening, while at the same time, when we think about education, we undervalue the importance of innovation. And I think it's time that we put that up there as an area where we will focus on, so that we're constantly thinking about what is new, what is next, what do our kids need, and in a way where we're able to actually measure our inputs based on the outputs that we get. So looking at our return on investment is a big piece of that office, so that when we know what we're spending or the amount of money we're spending on certain things, we know how much what we're getting out of it at the same time. Too often, and I don't think Lorain is absent from this reality, we spend money. We don't know what we're getting for it. We don't know what kids are getting for it, and that has to change. And we have to think about our dollars differently, and more importantly, making sure they're reaching our kids. Our Chief People Officer, I think she's there in the back, is Jackie Yonker, who is from the greater, or was living in the greater Cleveland area, and has joined us to lead up our work around people. And it's intentional that I mention people and not human resources. I think human resources as a title is antiquated. When we talk about people, we talk about care. We talk about how do we make people better, how do we ensure that the best people are in front of all of our scholars, and we as an organization are healthy, and we as an organization can have tough conversations, live with a ton of transparency, and most importantly, promote what we mean by our core values through everything that we do. So excited that Jackie is here. Our Chief of Schools is Dr. LaKimber Brown. You can stand up, that's fine. She is coming all the way from DC, where she was an instructional superintendent for, her network alone was the size of our district. So if you can imagine the work that takes place in DC, but excited to have her for many reasons, one of which, and I like to use this and brag about it because I have a picture with her, so I can put it on my wall. But she was a part of, or if you've heard of Leverage Leadership by Paul Brandberg, which is like a fundamental educational reform textbook that is just kind of growing across the nation when we think about ed reform. She was lucky to be one of the Leverage Leadership Institute Fellows, which is a select group of educational leaders from across the country that are selected to now go into the book a little bit deeper and be experts in how to deliver the practices that are inside of it, which is great, but that's not enough. She also will be featured as chapter 3 of his new book. So her work is not only because of her excellence in supporting young people in D.C., but nationwide as a principal and as a teacher on the West Coast, but her excellence is now expanded to the point where Paul Bramberg himself has featured her, asked her to be a part of his upcoming book. So if you want her autograph afterwards, she's available. And the role that I think I heard the most about from the community was our need to focus on connecting the home and school. The concern around parent engagement and how we involve parents in the learning process for our young people. Initially, this was not on my radar as a position when I wanted to kind of start this Lorain Promise. It came out of the birth of the work with the community and found that having a chief family office, an office that is dedicated and focused on connecting home and school, connecting families to their scholars' upbringing and well-being in our system from the time their scholars born in the city of Lorain became a priority. And I thought long and hard about who this person can be, because this person has to be someone who understands the dynamic and the importance of home and school, understands the nuances of how that impacts school culture and how that influences the well-being of our people in every single day, and someone who has lived that work. So as a teacher, as someone who's overseen school culture at different levels, who has worked at a state level with the New Jersey Department of Education, and then worked at the higher ed level for a time to actually even develop teachers even more. And so we're lucky to have Ms. Arliss Prass lead that work for us as our Chief Family Officer here in Lorain. That's the dream team, folks. Honestly, I don't say that sleight of mind or sleight of heart, because I truly believe this is the team that will create what we all have been talking about for 6-7 months. And I'm excited to see this team come together. I truly believe this is the team that will make the difference. This is the team that I think this commission will be proud 3, 4, 5 years from now to say we did exactly what we intended to do. So I thank you all for signing up and being a part of that. And most importantly, it's time to get to work. So thank you all. Still filibustering a little bit, people, sorry. But I also want to thank a few folks here that realize, as a community, this is not work that is done independently. I'm excited to see very familiar faces that come to many of our town halls and come to a lot of our conversations, regardless of unfortunate or just the dialogue that often lives in our newspapers and otherwise. It's exciting to see members from both the board and the Academic Distress Commission here tonight to have further discussion, and most importantly, right in the middle is all of our community. Because at the end of the day, we don't do this work without you. As a community member, as someone who works, lives, and breathes Lorain, we need you to help us get better. So I say that, for one, joining us along this journey, but two, making sure that you still ask us the really tough questions. So the stuff that I present tonight and stuff that we go through, I'm sure the ADC will have questions and insights and recommendations, which is wonderful. But I also would love to hear those same sentiments and concerns and questions and regards from our community as we move forward. Feedback is a gift. And without your feedback, we can't move this plan forward. So I want to make sure that it's said and more importantly felt from our community members who are here tonight. So I thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for being in attendance at all of our town halls. Thank you for coming to our CBS meetings and task force meetings and all the other meetings that take place in between these times together, because we've only gotten better because of you. So I thank you. So tonight, ADC, Academic Distress Commission, I have a bunch of things that we will cover, a lot of which is in your folder. So later tonight, if you also want to dive into it, while you're falling asleep or something like that, feel free to do so. But more importantly, it was a lot of what we've been working on, but more importantly, wanted to share publicly. For those that would like a hard copy, because it was a lot of paper, but those who want a hard copy, we can make those hard copies for you. Just see Elena afterwards, and we'll make sure you get a copy of anything you want to see. But also, this information will be on the website, as always, so that it is also visible. And I'll walk through some of the website things a little bit later once we get things up and running. With that said, let me walk you through what's in the folder. So behind the agenda on the right-hand side, you'll see some financial information, which Josh will walk through in a few minutes. So you'll see the general operating funds chart that was also mentioned and used at the last town hall. So it should be familiar to those that were at that meeting. We have an executive summary from, right behind that executive summary of the financial impacts of the MAP analysis, which was discussed at different points, but again, want to walk through that and give you an update on the progress we're taking against those. Behind that are a few survey results that I'll speak to as we talk about our principal selection process that's occurring this spring. And then behind that, I actually think there's a duplicate of the executive summary of the finance impacts, but the one that you have, the thicker copy, has more detail. So that's the one you can refer to just for your reference. On the left-hand side, I also, for all the wonderful senior leaders that you heard and met just a few minutes ago, the actual job descriptions that they are taking on are on the left-hand side. So if you just wanted to, or anyone wanted to review the job descriptions of our chiefs, they are here. I believe if they're not posted, we can also put those on the website for all to see. And then some positions that obviously are internal that have been new, we just added those so you can see those actual job descriptions, so you can see how that all comes together. But in a few minutes, we'll also see it in the PowerPoint of how the org chart kind of fleshes out and how the operation will kind of move forward from there. Okay? Any questions about that so far? I just wanted to catch my breath. Okay. And then the last document is the actual PowerPoint. I believe it's about 57 slides long, so I promise I won't be walking through every slide. I saw some heads turned down, but I promise I will hit most of them. Some of them are just so that you have the information, but most importantly, we'll walk through, like Mr. Richardson spoke about, through the operational, managerial, and instructional pieces, and then finish with recommendations and next steps that we have collectively on where we're going next in the short term, and then even give a little bit more fleshing out of detail around our current and expected progress through the rest of this year as we really are beginning to turn the corner to ramp up for the following.
And just for the record, I just wanted to be clear in that, make sure that we're on the same page and that our community is aware. Mr. Hardy, will this be available on the website?
Yes, this will be available on the website, and again, if there are any hard copies needed, we can print them. We'll just see Elena, and we can make it happen. This PowerPoint usually takes us maybe 24 hours to get it up, so if you can wait until right before you leave for Columbus on Friday, this will be posted for you to review if there are any questions or comments. Okay? Great. It looks like we're almost there. I have the clicker here, but I will start with the agenda. So again, as I had mentioned on page 2, we'll start with the operational pieces. So we'll talk about our past, current, and future budget projections. We'll walk through the executive summary of the MAP analysis, which again was the analysis on evaluating the purchase service side of our operation, about 17% of our budget. So we'll get a little bit more detail around that from our Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer. Then we'll jump into the managerial pieces around organizational and functional charts, our principal selection process, and then really starting to dive into a little bit of our strategic vision so you can see where we have been. And then speak a little bit about our instructional practices and where we're going with that. Those first 6, you'll notice that there are more bullets or more numbers for certain elements than others intentionally. I will say the first 7 months, not knowing truly what we were jumping into, the depth of change that is necessary around the organizational culture, around staffing and positions has taken a lot of time. It's been pretty significant. So the fact that instruction is only one of the 6, it's because we're just jumping into a lot of those pieces, which actually is pretty good timing because it gives us the spring to prepare for next year. So I say, again, I want to reiterate, a lot of the time, the first 6, 7 months, gosh, 8 months almost, has been on the operational and managerial side of things, and my hope is that will start to shift to the instructional pieces sooner. However, I will say every day I learn something else. And another new challenge that kind of takes our attention away from that driving force. However, I want to make sure the foundation is strong so that we can build upon it versus building upon a foundation that isn't settled or isn't strong enough for us to build the instructional practices we want to see. So I just want to make sure that is known. And then lastly, the recommendations and next steps will give you some of that context. So it is LCS presentation 2018 in the middle there. Thank you, Barb. So at this time, I will turn it over to Mr. Hill to go over the past, current, and future budget projections and the MAP analysis. Josh?
Okay, I'll kind of work through what you were provided in your folder there, starting off first with, I believe it's this one here. Actually, we can probably bring it up. I think it's the 4th slide on there. Oh.
Oh, I'm sorry. So, from beginning, and then 4th slide. Are you doing it?
Can I do it?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sometimes technology is just not our friend. We're trying.
I can click it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so it looks closer to this in your guys' packet, but it kind of lays it out there. This is kind of a snapshot of the previous fiscal year. Those are going to be actual expenditures within 2017 fiscal year. We got our current fiscal year, 2018, which has a blend of current spending up until this point and still remaining projections tied into there. So it's kind of a combo of the two. And then you have your projected fiscal year 2019 in here, which was a product of our budgeting process that we've already went through. Still kind of building it out a little more than what we've done, but my offices went through account by account. And I just wanted to key in on a few pieces here. If you look at the overall expenditures, the average for the last 3 years is roughly 7.6% increase overall. We're projecting with the new budget only a 2.4% increase. So we're doing well. I think the idea behind going through the budgeting that we did between purchase service and supply and materials was really looking at each expenditure within each account. So looking at it kind of a zero-based budget model and really making people accountable for each and every expenditure, making them think, okay, if I'm going to come to you with a new cost, I have to have something I'm replacing it with to where we're showing a 0% increase in most cases. So that's why you see for on there the purchase service, we actually are at a 0.62% increase, and the majority of that increase is accounted for in the inflationary pieces for some of our fixed costs, things we really can't control in regards to that. So we do have a slight increase there. Supply and materials, again, it's the same idea behind making people accountable for each and every expenditure and swapping in. If you're going to have something new, you got to have something that you're going to swap out for. So we're actually at a negative 14% on that, almost 15%. So the other piece I'll point to is the personal services line. This is all of our salary lines. That standard 5.7% increase over the last couple of years average. We have we're only looking at a 4% increase, and that's due to the same idea. If we're really getting a hold of our staffing levels and looking at if we're going to add staff, how are we offsetting it? So that mindset of keeping it level. We're not going to add. We're going to keep it level, at or below. Has been our new slogan. So in that 4% increase, that is just accounting for the already negotiated agreements, the increases that were already negotiated. They're already factored into that.
So Mr. Hill, just so that this is we really want this to be a kind of open kind of communication. So as you're going, do you mind questions?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So I just had a question. So when you say 5.7% average change over the past few years, when you say few years, can you please specify what does that mean? Like 2 years, 3 years, 5 years?
It's 3 years. That's
3 years.
You'll notice, and actually when you look at it from on your handout more so, this is lifted right off of our forecast.
Okay.
So I wanted to do it that way so we could roll it up to kind of give you an apples to apples comparison, because this is going to, when I do the forecast update in May, these numbers are going to feed right into that forecast.
Absolutely.
So that number there on the forecast is taking the average of the prior 3 years, meaning fiscal year 15, 16, and 17.
Okay. And as a next question, when we talk about some of the transitions we've made in our administration, and obviously people apply for jobs and we brought in new staff, and we've had some commitments to previous staff members who may still be under contract or may not be under contract. And I think it's important for the record and our community to talk about how you've been able to keep costs low in this transition so that, again, to the lay person in Lorain or in the surrounding community for them to truly appreciate how this administration's been able to manage those costs in a way that has been either cost neutral or, as you said, what was the terminology you use in-house? Reduce
At or
or
below.
At or below.
At or below.
Can you really break that down? Because I think there seems to be a disconnect in terms of how this works. And again, you deal with numbers all day. Ms. Lee doesn't, right? So can we, yeah, right. So can you really break that down and give us some more background around that and more context?
Absolutely. And what I did was go to, just for a cost comparison wise and staffing number wise, in your packet, I believe it's about 3 or 4 sheets in, I did a current staffing as of March 21st today, and then went back to July 2017 staffing. And this is the Board of Education. So this is accounting for, you know, your new chief positions, things along those lines. And based on that snapshot in time, you look back at July 2017, and we had 54 employees. As of today, on the Board of Education staff, we have 52. So we're 2 below where we were in July. If you look at overall cost, as of July 2017, we were at 4.5 million and some change. As of today, we are at 4.3 million and some change.
So we've saved money in comparison to where we've been.
We are saving money, and this is taking into account all positions that are added at this point. So this is taking into account all 5 new chief positions, the 2 senior project managers we have added. This is literally snapshot in time right now.
Thank you.
The other, to go back to this piece here, if you look at the employee retirement insurance benefits, you see the jump. There's a 3.3% average increase. We went to 6.4%. That is accounted for in this. We transitioned from the health trust to the new LERC consortium, and this is what's accounting for that. There was going to be an increase anyways if we stayed with the trust, and it was actually a more significant increase than what we're showing here, and this gives us that long-term plan. So, and we had discussed this in a prior meeting, but just to kind of tie it back.
And do you feel like that change will stabilize over time, or do you see, I mean, I think healthcare in general, I think those, you know, as a country across different sectors, we see those costs continue to rise. Do you think being a part of this consortium will stabilize our costs and protect us in a way that the former iteration of our health insurance didn't?
It absolutely will, because they look at they tell you to estimate anywhere from a 6 to 7% increase when you're a part of this consortium. I've looked back at the years at the consortium, they say that, and then they're roughly about a 3 to 4% increase standard. And on top of that, they also do a health care holiday. So there's even a savings in addition to there. So they claim a 3 to 4% increase, but then you're also not paying a full month.
Oh, wow.
So it's usually right at 0. And I've been a part of the health trust meetings, or the LERC meetings now, and when they discuss it, they actually decide, do we want to do the holiday and the 3 or 4% increase, or do we want to just stay at 0 and not do a holiday? They seem to, the group tends to lean towards doing the holiday, because they tend to do it right around Christmas for the holidays.
Thank you.
So then, and to answer your question, yes, we do see a spike here because we also had to pay for the first 3 years an investment into their pool.
Oh.
So we're paying a little bit more to get vested, and then after those 3 years, or sooner, depending on how our claims come in. They did say that if our claims come in at or below, they would look at speeding that time up. So, but once we are deemed vested, that cost comes down, and actually 3 or 4 years out in my forecast, I show a significant drop. So,
yeah, and so I just want to say, again, kudos to the administration and team. I remember when Mr. Hardy first came on, this was like his first, remember? He walked in and it was this big issue. So it feels really good to know that you've taken care of this, because obviously healthcare is something that we all need or should have access to. So I do appreciate that.
If I can underscore, Josh, you've done a tremendous job making that happen. I remember the times you came into my office with a ton of concern around it, because it was a significant amount of money that we were in the hole for, staying in the health trust, and you made the recommendation, and I appreciate you pushing that forward.
of course. And then the only other piece that on here, you see the jump in There is a jump in capital outlay that is looking at more of a long-term. This was an addition we were looking at anyways, because it's the technology upgrade and looking at adding more physical computers in the hands of each student. So that was kind of a standard increase we were looking at anyways. And then the one other piece is there's a 12% increase in the other objects line. That is due to an increase in our liability insurance, which is a direct impact of our prior 3-year claims history. We knew it was coming. It was kind of inevitable just based on the claims we've had over the past 3 years. So we did see a spike in that. So, and then to move along then next to the summary of the MAP analysis. I actually took Sam Mehta, the gentleman who did this analysis for us, sent me his actual spreadsheet or his financial impact summary, and I took and kind of plugged in the update section. So this is lifted right off of his recommendations for each one of these areas. So and I'll run through each one of them.
And Mr. Hill, I'm sorry to interrupt, but for the record, I know that's an acronym. Can you explain what MAP is?
MAP is, what is it, Meta Advisory Programs?
Yes.
Yes.
I could be, let me double check. I don't want to have that wrong on the record.
Partners.
Partners, thank you. Thank you.
And Meta Advisory Partners, Meta coming directly from the gentleman's last name. It's Sam Mehta who owns the company. And what he did was go through and did a programmatic spend looking at all the purchase services that would directly feed into our expenditure line items. His recommendations, and I'll go through each section here. So for food service, we had a carryover fund balance within food service of about $1.5 million. This is something that obviously it's earmarked for specific things, so it's not exactly easy to chip away at that large sum that we're carrying over year. So we tried to get creative with it. His recommendation was to get creative, maybe look at a one-time purchase for food service. Some of the things that we did was look at, and there's a few employees on here that we are going to restructure how they're paid. And we're going to try and start taking part of their salaries out through a time and effort log through the food service. So it'll be a savings then to the general fund, because that portion of their salary will then come out of the food service account. We are looking at the possibility of applying some indirect cost rate to the food service fund. I actually asked for an opinion on that from the state. I'm still waiting to hear back if it's something we're able to do or not able to do, being that it is it's kind of unheard of in this area to apply the indirect cost, so I'm trying to get an opinion to whether or not we can do it. And then we're also just looking at the creative ways he mentioned to maybe possibly do a one-time purchase. I've been working back and forth with Mr. Hawks and trying to see if we can do a one-time purchase. If there's a absolute need we're going to be needing to do, instead of taking that out of the general fund, doing it out of the food service account.
And this may be a question for Mr. Hardy. I remember when we first came on as a commission and we were assembled, there was an analysis given by Earmark over the amount of students who were eating, and we saw was that as students got older, we saw less lunches being consumed. Mm-hmm. Has the administration addressed that? And if so, can you give us an update on that?
Mr. Hawks, would you have any information on that? If not, we can get it to the commission.
Yeah, we could get that information from you. I know we do a lot of surveys and updates with that, absolutely.
And we meet monthly with them to discuss, different options and really looking at the program. I don't know where we're at percentage-wise, but we can get the information for you.
Josh, can you go into a little bit more detail about the time and effort in the food service? Because when I think of time and effort, I think of like a Title I teacher that has to do a time and effort log, because some of their salaries paid out of general fund and then some of the salaries paid out of Title I. So how's that work with food service?
It's exactly the same thing. It's a log that for the time you're doing the food service work, same thing, time you're doing the Title I work, you are keeping a log of basically, I work an 8-hour day, 2 hours I was working within food service, the other 6 hours it was doing my standard job duties, and it's that log that then they turn into payroll, and it's just how we take them out of the correct account.
So what funding source drives that account?
The
for
06, the food service.
Okay, which comes from,
It's federal funding.
Is
okay.
it TANF?
Hmm?
Is it TANF?
TANF?
No, I'm sorry.
Is it TANF? It's not TANF.
No, it's not.
So part of the salary is federal funding and part of the salary.
And that's why we got to do the time and effort
GLP.
log,
General
yeah.
fund.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's a good question, John.
Okay, then to move along to the transportation section. His recommendation, Sam's recommendation, was to look at overall transportation costs and maybe look at maximizing the route utilization. We kind of looked at it in a little bit of a different way, in the sense that we wanted to get more ridership numbers up, percentage of students using the buses more so, instead of truly looking at route utilization and a cost savings maybe of cutting down some routes. So the three recommendations, or the three updates that we have, is for the 2018-19 school year, we will reposition the bus stops within a closer radius to the schools to maximize that route utilization and hopefully increase student ridership. Number two on that list, for the remainder of the current school year, just so we're not waiting a whole year to try and fix the problem we have, we're going to allow the buses to stop along the routes to pick up students that they see walking to school, basically. So anyone that is within that 2-mile radius, if they're on the way to the school anyways, that they will stop and pick them up and take them to the school.
These kids have it way too good. When I was in school here in Lorain, you missed a bus, you wasn't at your stop, you had to walk.
And then we'll just continue to evaluate the positioning of the current bus stops and route structure, so we're optimizing the per student transportation cost and increasing the ridership. So it's going to be an ongoing.
And is there busing available for high school students, or?
No.
No. But if in this current configuration, if a high school student is walking and they see him, they'll pick him up and bring him?
Well, it's in the 2-mile radius.
So-
You can speak to it better.
What we do now is, way back, we had cut busing at the high school level. But for a student, what they have done since then is they are graciously providing a loop. And what the high school students have to do, they have to go get a $25 bus pass. And then for a student does a loop during the day, midday, and first thing in the morning, and at home with that pass. So they, for a student, is providing high school transportation.
Thank you.
And Mr. Hawks, who pays that 25? Is the onus on the students?
The family does. Yeah, family pays the 25 to get a picture with an ID, and that's how they get on the bus.
And if for students who can't afford, that may be on free or reduced lunch, who can't afford, are there opportunities or alternative ways?
There have been opportunities out there for our scholars, yes. We have different funding. I know the high school has collected money for a lot of the kids, and there's other avenues we have worked with our scholars that were unable to do that, yes.
Thank you. Good.
Then the next section, we're looking at human resources. He directly spoke to substitutes, but obviously from the discussion about the human resource office basically going away, now we have the people office. I've had conversations with Jackie within the people office, and so we're kind of reshaping how we view human resources per se, and that's with that creation of the people office. We're going to help newly appointed, or with the help of newly appointed Jacqueline Yonker, we are moving to a model that will support the employees kind of from the onboarding process all the way through the exit interview if we do lose the employee, to really see why we're not retaining. Obviously, there's a cost to training an employee, a cost to actually keeping the employee, and every time that person leaves, we got to start over and invest in the new person again. So really retaining of the employee. So, and part of that has to do with having a sound recruitment strategy and also a sound retention strategy. And those are both direct things that Jackie is speaking to and within her office and kind of building her office around. And also looking at our current employee management systems, we have ASOP, PeopleWorks, and seeing if they're the most relevant, seeing if we're really getting the most bang for our buck. And just from conversations I've had with me and Jackie, I believe we have other programs out there that probably could, might be more cost efficient, but definitely could help us kind of utilize and manage staff a little better all the way through. I'm going to move on to the technology section. With the help of Mr. Hawks, we have looked at the need for hotspots and also data plans with the tablets we have in the district. With almost every building, or with every building having Wi-Fi, it almost seems like that's an unnecessary cost. So we are looking at eliminating those. And then also, we're currently transitioning to a district-wide network. And I'm not going to act like I know anything about technology, but it's my understanding that it'll be 10 times faster and cheaper. So we should have a much faster speed. And not only, I know prior, the high school, and I'm probably going to screw this up, I'm sure. Mr. Kluber's here somewhere. The tunnels of transferring data was inconsistent. So to some of the buildings, they might have had a one megabyte transfer, but only, or 1 megabyte capacity, but only be able to transfer 500. So now we're going to a consistent stream to each building, and it's 10 times faster, and it will be our network, so it'll be significantly cheaper. And then also looking at, we're doing an evaluation of our current computers, whereas in the past we had looked at Apple iPads or purchased Apple iPads. We're looking at 2 less expensive alternatives in the Chromebooks and the Windows S machines. And based on which option, with the Chromebooks could possibly be a savings of $162,000 a year. With the Windows S machines, a savings of $300,000 a year. Under the general admin section, we in the current fiscal year have consolidated the number of law firms, and also we had some monthly retainers from previous law firms we had eliminated, so to kind of put a cap on costs. And then for the 2018-19 school year, we're going to require comparable quotes for all purchases. In the past, it was usually just done for grants. So we're making that uniform across, also for general purposes. And under the instructional software section, again, I just reiterated the comparable quotes. This is probably the most relevant to that section with instructional software. It's not going to be, okay, we've always had this program, so we're going to continue it. We are going to always be looking at what's the next big thing, looking at cost, that return on investment, and that kind of breathes throughout this whole document. And then within the special revenue, the last section, for the current fiscal year, professional development has been limited pending an evaluation of current programs and restructuring. And then for the 2018-19 school year, the AVID program will be eliminated due to limited return on investment. This will free up roughly over $400,000, and this could be for a new initiative that will impact scholars better and get us that more powerful return on investment. So, any questions on the map analysis?
Well, can you speak a little bit about the AVID program and about, I mean, I'm aware of the program, but when you say limited return on investment, for the record, so again, I think the ADC meetings could be a great place where we just are transparent, where we speak to questions and issues that are brought to us as individual in our individual capacities, but also as a commission. So can you speak to what we mean by that so that, again, for the record, the public's aware of what we mean by limited return on investment?
You go first, I'll follow.
Okay. Just in regards to, it's on my end of it, the price that's associated with that program, and then through meetings with myself, Mr. Hardy, and then also Rachel Tanzi, our grants coordinator, just looked at how it's impacting not only the percentage of students it's impacting, but what kind of results it's returning for each one of those students. You know, so if the program itself if we're not seeing, it's 100% data-driven, basically.
So in short, the number of scholars impacted does not match the $400 price tag, right? And so in addition, early on in this year when I was kind of visiting schools and asking kids about things they loved and they did not love, to be completely honest, AVID was something that came up which prompted the conversation on whether or not it is truly impacting our kids the way it should from a qualitative standpoint, but also from a quantitative standpoint.
Is that due to the program or due to the staff running the program?
I think it's a combination of both. I think what we realized more than anything else, and I'll speak to that a little bit more when we get into some of our next steps, I fundamentally believe our teachers do a tremendous job working their tails off to do right by kids. I think it is now on us as a district to better support them in implementing some of these initiatives, programs, and the quality of instruction we need to see. Having Chapter 3 of the Next Leverage Leadership book sitting in our senior cabinet meetings every week is helpful because we need to change the way we look at instruction. I think that will foster everything we want out of the quality of instruction versus it just kind of plopping in a program and think it's going to run itself.
Any other questions on the MAP piece?
Thank you.
The only other piece I have in here, and I was lucky enough to get this news today, it's a draft copy of, and this is just the management letter piece of the state audit for 2017. We had a 100% clean audit with only 3 recommendations for management. So no findings. And again, this is just the short 3-page piece. If somebody would like the 86-page audit, by all means email me and I'll send it to you.
That's great.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hill. Great job.
Thank you.
Great job. Any questions before we move to the next segment? I'm going to move. Actually, Elena, do you mind driving the PowerPoint from there? So we're going to move to the next part of the agenda, which is directly surrounding the managerial components that support a lot of what is coming out of what Josh just presented around the operational and financial portions. So I'll start with the organizational and function charts, and I start there because obviously the money that's being spent on the leaders here, but more importantly, how does this all come together? Who is driving what and why? And then give you a little bit nitty-gritty of how we'll hold those individuals accountable as we go. So the first slide that you will see is the high-level organizational function chart, which is, again, different than positions. Function meaning the things that that office will do. So from left to right, speaking to the idea and focus on strategy and innovation and driving the work every single day in our schools, what does that look like? What is our return on the investments? One of those examples Josh just spoke to around AVID, but nonetheless doing that with all of our programs and anything that we're bringing forward. That also dovetails off the importance of, as we innovate, how do we know it's going to work before we put it into our schools? For example, this spring we're piloting Kickboard, which is supporting some of our positive school culture initiatives in 3 of our elementary schools to see if it works before we go full blast and implement it next year. If it isn't working, we're not going to use it. If it is working, great. Let's learn from that and implement it in all of our schools. Our operations office, as I mentioned, trains, planes, everything else in between to make sure that it works. That's Jeff's world. Our schools will fall under Dr. Brown and all of those areas from our special ed, ELL, all of our curriculum development, our coaching of our school leaders, and thinking about career education for our kids. That all falls under her work stream through obviously other individuals as well, but in the school's office. People office is a lot of the human capital strategy. Josh alluded to the importance of understanding the life cycle of an employee from the moment they're onboarded to the moment they exit our system, and what we need to do to keep them engaged and most importantly growing within our organization. And then the family office is a lot of which speaks to how do we make people feel really good about our system and working with us and building those relationships and connecting the dots between home and school. So again, at a high level, that's the function chart. Underneath each of the names there that you saw are the commitments of the Lorain promise that they're attached to. And they're intentionally designed this way so that we're outlining offices to work together because, again, the work can become siloed if there's just an office working on one commitment independently, but you'll see no one office is the only driver of any one commitment, and no 2 offices work together more than twice. So there is some cross-collaborative intentionality around the work that needs to get done through how the Lorain Promise and how our offices will function. Underneath those offices, you will see those director positions and otherwise. Elena, if you can go to the next slide. You will see those director level positions. Some of them where you see PH is a placeholder because the people office is brand new and we've had some transition in that office. And for that reason, we want to give Ms. Yonker the opportunity to think through what needs to happen. I say that for a few reasons, and I want to underscore this because we're finding and beginning to get more information around how our people office, or formerly known as our HR office, has run in the past, and we're finding some gaps. And some of them may be significant. I don't want to speak to what they are until I have all the information, but we're realizing there are some personnel challenges and some practices and protocols that have not been followed in a way that was efficient or effective. So, it's going to take some time to wrap around the personnel side. Given, in any school district, that's about 80% of your budget. There's a deep dive that we need to take into the personnel side of the work that we do. So please know that is coming, and the work is going to be extensive in that office. And the rest you'll see are pretty commonplace. Again, the strategy office might be the most new in the sense of how we're thinking about strategy and innovation, but everything else is relatively standard. What you'll also see up there are some positions that have not been filled at this point and are also supported by grant funds versus just GOB. For example, our director of early childhood, we had interviews about a week or two ago for that position. However, that money will be supported by some philanthropic dollars so that we can get the work done. We're realizing that we're moving to a pre-K for all in all of our buildings. We need someone to be able to drive that work day to day, because again, that is also pretty extensive. So I just highlight that as an example, and we'll pause though for any questions you might have from the function to the organizational charts before I go to how those individuals will be held accountable. Yeah.
Academic deans.
Yes.
It's kind of a new thing.
Yes.
Around here. Can you talk a little bit about that and
Sure.
function and how many and?
Sure. So our academic deans will have actually I'll speak to the leadership team as a whole. So there will be a turnaround principal at every building, and then there will be a dean of scholar and family engagement focusing on the school culture, school classroom culture and management side of things, and making that home to school connection that will ultimately funnel up and be supported by our family office. On the left-hand side, there will be, or whatever side you want to say, the other side, the academic house will be someone who is supporting and helping coach our teachers on a day-to-day basis, help us create a culture where we're starting with the standard and unpacking the understanding of a standard down to daily objectives that will allow us to drive to very specific outcomes for kids on a daily basis. We right now don't have that structure in place that creates the strength and focus that we need, and so that position is going to put a ton of energy on the quality of teaching and learning in every building with a little more oomph than our traditional academic coach position, because it expands to more of a someone that could coach but also be an evaluator of the performance and quality of instruction that we see in our classes every single day.
And possibly someone who could also do like PD?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And the hope is that as we become a culture of more of a learning culture, the hope is that we're learning from each other more and more. To that point, when we look at next year's calendar, we have, I think traditionally over the past few years, maybe a day and a half for professional learning. Next year we have 7. And those days are actually professional collaboration days, so that teachers will have time with teachers to work on the things they need to do to get this year started. So that's part of that culture change.
Those two positions, are they on the administrative side or are they on the certified staff side?
Yep, so I had posted it on both initially. Honestly, I did that because I wanted to see who was going to apply. I didn't want to scare anyone away. If they're talented, we'll figure that piece out. The intent for those positions are to be more evaluative in nature, and so being on the administrative side is the direction that I went with those 2 positions. However, those individuals that may not have that licensure or those challenges, we're working on figuring out how to provide them with the temporary licensure and really build them up to the level they need to be so they're certified, but more importantly, we don't want to turn talent away. And so that's the direction we're going with those positions. Any other questions around org or function charts? All right, I'm going to move on then to maybe. Oh, so these are the individual breakdowns. I won't go through all of these. There's actually a key performance indicator chart for each of the chief level individuals who have not only the larger goals that they're attached to that I spoke to in the org chart. So for commitment 2 and 3, which Josh will be held accountable to, there are individual KPIs that we'll measure on a regular interval that will outline how we're measuring up or pushing towards those bigger goals. So for example, if you look at something as easy as the number of college touch points our kids get and measuring that on a regular interval, trying to figure out, all right, how much are we spending on that and how many kids are actually touching it, and then looking at the ROI of that, that shows up on Josh's dashboard. So Elena, you can scroll through as I'm speaking to this because there's one for every single chief with multiple pages of KPIs in which they are attached to, which are aligned to that larger dashboard that we're building. And one day we're going to try to click on it and it's going to work. Because we've tried, if you've been to town halls over the past few months, we've been trying to click on it so you can actually see it through the PowerPoint. I did it this time too, so we're going to try again today. But nonetheless, these KPIs lead to outcomes that we'll measure throughout the year. So we're getting information without waiting till the end of the year, right? By the end of the year, it's already too late. We need to know how we're progressing month by month on key performance indicators. Well, I'm sorry.
I just want to make a comment that I think this is great. As we all know, education is under the microscope when it comes to outcomes and accountability. This is wonderful to be able to see this. One suggestion I would have is, if you're going to show this to us in the future, if you have a baseline for instance, the percentage of scholars using transportation options, what was this, so that we can see the impact.
Absolutely.
And that's, of course, going to be important in any presentation that you're going to give.
I love it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Not a problem. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
And to that point, as a follow-up, is there a comparable sort of dashboard that was here prior to your coming on? And if so, I mean, are these completely different metrics you're looking at and trying to gauge, or is some of that previous data applicable and something that we could use as benchmarks in moving forward?
I think there are repositories of data in different areas. I think we have used a couple of different systems. I don't think there's an apples to apples comparison to a lot of these things. I think this is erring on a lot more intentionality and detail, but there are like attendance numbers and things like that we can pull on that we're using as a baseline.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you.
This last slide is just to give you an indicator of how we're meeting as well. So these are internal in-house meetings for each level of the organization, starting with the individual check-ins that I have with each of the chiefs starting in April, now that they're all here, to our cabinet meetings, to our extended leadership team meetings, to our larger admin office meeting buildings, to our individual chief meetings. So everything is there. The meetings that happen internally every single day that make this work go are listed up there with the intentionality around this is our opportunity to reflect on what we're doing, what we need to do better, and creating a course to go forward.
Nice.
The next segment is the managerial and principal selection part of it. So that was the last part was heavily focused on the admin building, which again, I will say was probably about 4 or 5 months of the first 6 or 7 months through interviews and conversations and creating what we needed to do with many people that you see here in the audience, making that happen. The next phase was then also thinking about school leadership in all of our buildings. This is probably the hardest section for me to talk about for many reasons. One, I understand the importance of a great school leader in every building. Great schools don't happen without great school leaders, and it's very hard to find, if you will ever find, great schools without a great school leader. This was a priority. This was a priority in my interview day. I remember on interview day that I made the comment that by December we would have discussions around who will be a part of the new leadership team or begin that process. And it was very clear then that it was something that had to be evaluated and understood. And there was 2 ways that we spent some time evaluating the quality of our school leaders and who will lead the next few years within our district. First was by looking at data. So all decisions are driven by the numbers behind what we're seeing over the past 3 years from our school leaders, from our schools, and then spending some time in a really rich and robust interview process, which I'll go into some detail on. So over the next few slides, you'll see the actual results, and again, it's an eye chart. If you could see that, can I please have your eyes? But again, if you want a hard copy or if you want a copy of this, it'll be on the website, whatever it might be. You can take a peek at it. But what you would see up here is each one of our schools' performance over the last 3 years, starting from left to right, the most current year to 3 years ago. So left to right performance. And what I highlighted here in red in the second column over was the grade level where there was at least 50% or more of our kids who were not performing at proficient or higher. So if you notice, there's a lot of red. I think about that pretty heavily because if we're going to make that change instructionally, we have to make sure that our buildings are led with those leaders who are going to be able to change those reds to greens and to elevate the performance of our young people. What makes that so hard is because there's a lot of hardworking school leaders that do this or work at this every single day, and results just don't match that effort. So I understand that, but know that this is part of my decision-making process around who the school leaders will be for next year. Hence why we went through a pretty intensive interview process, which I'll speak to next. And that interview process started with the notion that yes, data tells us one story or a big piece of the story, but we should spend some time with each of our school leaders internally for them to showcase what they're able to do through a rigorous, a very comprehensive interview day, and a very complete set of exercises that I'll speak to in a second. So those two pieces will inform who those leaders will be. So during this process, just to give you an update of where we looked, we kind of scoured as much of America as we could, dug deep into the local NEO region, and spent just a lot of time trying to find out who would like to be and be a part of this charge. We had almost around, I want to say 270 to 300 different applicants for one of the 3 school leadership positions, so which I think is tremendous. When you think about the size of our district, I know when I was in St. Louis with 24,000 kids and 72 buildings, if we had 300 applicants, we were jumping for joy. And that's a district 4 times the size. So I think it's a testament to not only the people that are here, but a testament to people seeing this as an opportunity to create real change for kids. So that's where we looked. The next slide you will see the process. There was first a pretty extensive review and paper screening by our chief of schools, our chief family officer, and a bunch of our other chiefs and directors who spent some time just looking at resumes and paper screens. From there, it was a very robust and exciting day of interviews. For a lot, many I've never seen a full day. So when they signed up and heard that their interview was 8:30 to 3:30, they were like, so which hour of that 8:30 to 3:30? But no, when they found out that lunch was provided, you were 8:30 to 3:30, right? And to think about it, the reason why it was structured this way was for a few reasons. One, we wanted those that were being interviewed to understand really what the work it was going to take to turn around a school district. We didn't want people to come in and sit around a table and answer just questions, because you know, I think we're probably professionals at answering questions to some degree. So engaging in what the work would actually be was important, on top of, for those folks that were a part of it, engaging and saying, do I want to be a part of this process? And to be completely transparent, there were a number of interview days where individuals said they did not and left halfway through. So in these in-person interviews, we had a vision presentation where we wanted to hear the vision of how a school leader was going to work through and lead a school through role-playing many different situations, from family to school culture, and legitimately role-playing. Like, given a scenario, someone was acting, you know, they were the best Tom Hanks or Sandra Bullock, or fill in your favorite actor or actress. Denzel, yes. I was waiting for that one from the audience from somewhere. But nonetheless, they role-played the situation to a T. And it was not just, you know, tell me what you would say. No, you were really going to say it and see how it actually plays. And for those that went through it can attest to that. And then there was a deep data analysis of how you look at numbers and how you would change outcomes based on numbers, into looking at school culture. So all the elements that you would want to see in a principal, in a turnaround principal, making turnaround efforts, it was part of that day. From there, we're creating the final principal pool. And again, individuals this week internally will find out if they've made it to the finalist round. So those that interviewed for for turnaround position internally will be notified this week, and then they'll be added to the external pool. And then that the combination of the two pools will be meeting with our community in partnership with our teachers union. Mr. Pickering was a big voice in pushing for an opportunity for teachers, community members, staff to be able to meet their future or potential principal before we hired them. So there will be a day, it's a wonderfully constructed day that will outline an opportunity for those conversations to happen so that our principal candidates and our community can match. And so community can rank their individuals and who they like and see, and we will reflect on what those numbers tell us before we make those final selections for our school leaders. And we will do the same for our dean process with our turnaround principals and deans having the opportunity to connect. Those are the elements we were looking for in our interview process along the way. And again, all the things that I outlined or spoke to during the selection day, we were looking for very intentionally through a series of rubrics that outline these pieces. And we can go to the next slide, Elena. And the members that are on the panel, which I kind of alluded to, are ready. But again, looking for 6 or 7 folks that will be able to speak to our potential candidates and give us feedback on who they see and could be a part of our leadership teams. And that just gives you more description of who we're looking for. This is a sample. Again, it may change depending on the school. But having a PTA rep, a parent, a teacher, someone representing the union would be important. And the community, obviously, is what we're looking for. This is the length of time that each community panel will have with our principals. We're hoping that, obviously some principals will meet with multiple schools, multiple school communities, because we feel we want to find the right fit. So you might be a great finalist candidate, but we want to even be more intentional and say you might be a great finalist candidate for this school and going the extra step. It's a full day. It will be April 7th. Yes. Great. Whew. I was reaching for that one. April 7th, which is a Saturday where we pull all of this together. The hope is that we make these decisions, finalize our decisions by late April, again, taking the voice of the community and ultimately making the decision for who will lead our schools by mid to late April, and hoping that we can get all of the principals, whether they're currently in buildings or currently from outside of the district, on board late May, early June, and begin the process of creating the change we want to see. Any questions about that?
Pretty fabulous.
Okay, thank you. Lastly, I don't know if this was interesting to you all at all, but I included the demographics of those that applied specifically for the turnaround principal position. We're still doing some applications and interviews for our dean positions, but we can more than happy to share this information as well. 73 applicants just for the turnaround principal pool itself. Along with interviews of the top 40. And again, this is 73 of almost 300 for all of the school leadership positions. 17 internal candidates interviewed, ranging in 7 to 12 years of experience, and a third of those candidates were people of color. Good to go? Keep going? All right. Sorry, let me just catch up where I was. So yeah, driven by our vision. So this section I'll go relatively quickly through, but this is just taking where we are with our Lorain Promise and aligning it to the initiatives that we're pushing forward. For those that have been to a town hall, I apologize. Some of this has come up a couple of times, but I wanted to share it in a transparent fashion for all to hear. But those, again, are our 5 big, what am I missing? Our 5 big commitments, thank you, that align to the Lorain Promise, and underneath them are 5 individual initiatives that will drive the work over the course of this year. The process, if you can go back one second, Alana, the process that we've taken from the left-hand column here of those 5 commitments, we've created a task force for each of those 5 commitments that aligned to each initiative and asked for feedback from the community. I know, Ms. Lee, you were at the early childhood initial task force meeting, for example, so it combines community members, current teachers and staff members to think about, if we're going to have pre-K for all, if we're going to improve the instructional vision for kindergarten, pre-K through 2nd grade instruction, what does that look like on the ground? And having the voice of the community and teachers is very important. That voice will then drive the work that is going to be, our senior project managers will make sure that that project plan to go from ideas and the implementation process to actual committing to what we should see in schools happen is with that project plan. There's a leader or an office that oversees those processes. We align our budget, and then we're attaching matching a partner, an expert in the field, whether it's locally or nationally, who knows how to make this work go. They'll be our training wheels as we start the bike, and then as the bike starts to go, we take off those training wheels. So no longer will we be latched on to a person who will provide professional learning on and on, year after year, because we shouldn't be paying people salaries over time, but just for a stint or a piece of time. And so the commitment to those partners are temporary until we can get the work going and I think, John, to your point earlier around how we build the capacity with our teachers so they can take it on and do the work. Before all of that, we pilot these elements. In some areas, we won't be able to pilot. We just have to go with them. For example, some of the registration work around pre-K is underway because we have to really register our kids and make sure that it's right. But we're also taking note on what's working from the return on investment side of things so we can improve the process for next year. The next slide just gives you what those initiatives are called in that middle sort of column next to Big 5 initiatives, and then gives you the elements or components of each of those initiatives. So we're going to try one last time, Elena, to click on that data dashboard. See. Yep, all right. I promise you it's a real thing. I don't know what else to tell you. It's real. But nonetheless, that dashboard is going to be the backbone of how we know how we're doing. And I think it's going to be important because that's going to give you information as an ADC, but our community as well, because it will be on the website once it's finalized. Nonetheless, I wanted to show you even deeper breakdown of how those initiatives break up into our school-based task force members, and we have a community base that's growing. That are
David, can I interject just real quick?
Sure.
I was crazy excited to see the dashboard, but
yeah.
So
it was great.
Who built the dashboard, and how much does that cost to operate?
Yeah, so it's through Schoolzilla. They're an organization out of California that kind of brings all of those data points together. The exact number, Josh, do you know the exact number off the top of your head? I do not. I know they charge us, I don't even want to tell you how much they charge per, it's by pupil, it's a per pupil service, but we can get that information to you. And I want to say, actually, it may be posted, so when we go to, we're going to try to click on something else, and maybe it'll show up there, and so you can see the actual numbers, because it's on our potential partners page that shows Schoolzilla, and that proposal will be in there, and it'll show you the price. Okay? So nonetheless, there's a school-based task force and there's a community-based task force, and the intent is those two pieces coming together will bring those initiatives alive. So you'll see on the left-hand side the school-based part, and then on the right-hand side the community-based part. Okay. Just wanted to give you the number of individuals that have come to our task force meetings to this point. So by commitment, those that initially signed up and those that actually showed up to the meetings. So it's encouraging to see in 2 of the 5 committee meetings, we actually have more people come than actually originally signed up. And for the rest, they were pretty comparable to the number that said they were going to come. They came. So I'm very happy to see the number of individuals that are participating in driving what our initiatives will look like going into next year.
Who runs the task force meetings?
Yeah, so the task force meetings are run currently by our directors or higher of those specific fields. So, for example, Pre-K for All is being sponsored by Doreen Morrell, who's has been over our special education, ELL, ECE. Once our director of ECE comes on board, they'll take on that task force and have a senior project manager help that work go over time. Okay. And lastly, the development of our district instructional framework. This is, again, the one that is going to take the most time to get going, and here's just the steps we're taking. Obviously, there's a task force attached to it. We're looking to align a partner, again, those training wheels to get this work going. Hopefully, in a few weeks, I'll have some good news around who that partner might be who will help guide that work and work through the spring to make that happen. And then inform schools of any anticipated changes around curricular resources, around instructional philosophy or approach to instruction by May 10th. That's the promise that I've been pretty public about, and May 10th being that day. Having a Spring School Leader Institute where, again, our school leaders will prepare for 2018, 2019, how much?
37,000.
37,000, John, for Schoolzilla.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Then having some time in the summer to prep. Again, our school leaders come back in August, a little before teachers return. And then, summer prep is more for district folks who are here, getting ready for our school leaders to return. And then those professional collaboration days I mentioned that have moved from a day to now 7, and then opening school in a strong fashion. So that's the timeline. the components of this framework are fourfold. So having and making sure that we're grounding everything we do in strategic assessments, so starting with the end in mind and understanding what grade assessment should look like, and then creating learning cycles around those assessments so that during the year, intentionally building how we're scope and sequencing the work from starting with assessment and backwards mapping from there, and then reassessing after that learning cycle takes place. Making sure that all of our materials are standards aligned and the instruction is aligned to what we're asked for by the state, and more importantly, what our kids need to know to be successful in life. And moving away from the idea that because I taught it means they've mastered it. So that shift is going to be challenging, but we're also making sure that we're focusing on standard-based grading model next year, so that all of our kids will and teachers will know how far or how close they are to mastering a specific standard, and that's how they're graded. Instead of grading on just turning in a piece of paper, we need to move towards understanding and mastery of our kids. So we will say truly that kids have mastered work.
Mr. Hardy,
yes.
can I interject here?
Sure can.
One of the, early on, when we had the new teachers project in and they were sort of going around meeting with teachers in buildings, looking at coursework, one of the things that was really concerning was the sort of the disconnect between worksheets that were being handed out and grade levels, and whether or not that work was grade level appropriate. Yeah. That was really disturbing. I don't know if you all remember that on the commission.
Absolutely.
Like, speak to, like, how do we make sure that never happens again? Yeah. And so what does that look like on the ground level, a very practical ground level?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I think one, by moving to a standards-based grading model where no longer, the completion of a worksheet gets you an A, B, C, or D, but the mastery of the standard or the skill that is within that document will be the grade, is one. Two, it's a shift in how we help and support our teachers. To be completely honest and transparent, going into some schools and their classroom, there are doors that are locked. So that just is an indicator that people don't go in and out of our classrooms the way that they should. And partially, and no fault to our teachers, I think, for whatever, that might have been a past practice for whatever reason. However, it doesn't create the ongoing dialogue and conversation that needs to happen between coach and teacher to improve instruction. There shouldn't be a day where a school leader or a peer or multiple peers are in and out of classrooms helping and supporting in what good instruction looks like by giving them regular feedback on that instruction, ensuring that it is standards aligned. And third, it is going to take, it's a huge leap and I think a huge transformation we're going to have to take in how we develop high quality lessons and what they look like and how we support the development of them over time. So I think it's the combination of those three things, the mandate and expectation for what standard-based grading looks like, the idea of observation and feedback being something routine and regular, and the idea that the expectation of what grade instruction and preparation for grade instruction should look like as components of changing that culture. I think it's a culture change more than anything else. And I want to reiterate that there are a ton of teachers that work their tails off, but I think the guidance that they need to provide that instruction needs to be enhanced so they can do what is best by kids because they want to.
Absolutely. And so can you speak a little bit about that support? So if I'm a teacher that's worked in this district for X amount of years, I mean, this is new, this is different. Yeah. And, how do we support our teachers in a way that's meaningful? And
yeah. I think there's two things, and I think that's the recreation of the school leadership team. So having a turnaround principal, an academic dean, and a dean of scholar and family engagement who can support not only classroom behavior, but can also improve learning culture and behavior in a classroom will help create the space where, one, our teachers work really hard, but how do we value them? And I think those individuals will help bring the value back to the classroom that is necessary, and creating a space where it is not a gotcha moment if I come into your room. It's actually a moment where we can get better together and support teaching and learning in a way that's effective, which is, again, I think a huge culture shift.
Well, I think as a teacher, the important thing is to not just say, I want you to do something new, and they need to be shown and modeled and given the opportunity to learn how to do those things, so that they're not just kind of, we want you to do this, do it. Well, what does it look like? Yeah. Give me, modeling. Show me exactly what this is going to look like in my classroom.
Yeah. On top of that, I mean, that goes back to that piloting side and even just the opportunity, the collaboration days for teachers to just practice.
Right.
right? Like just try it out before you're in front of kids and get feedback before kids, and then continue to learn that way. Versus, to your point, you know, school starts on, you know, middle of August, the day before, you get, oh, here, run with this. That's not fair. It's not fair to teachers. It's not fair to the craft of teaching, and it's not fair to individuals who really want to do right by kids every single day. So nonetheless, I appreciate that notion, and that's a shift we're looking to make. We're going to go on to the next slide. It just gives you how all those pieces come together, because in the middle is then quality instruction, which is, again, the focus of the work that we do, period. I don't know how else to put it, but that graphic is just outlining the importance of all of those pieces will drive towards the quality instruction we want to see. Some of the recommended next steps, again, these are not just germane to the instructional side, but the operation, managerial, and instructional side of things. So continue to provide timely and transparent information publicly, and I want to see if you can click on publicly in a minute, Elena. And then implementing a departmental budget process. So this is something that I mentioned at the town hall. And Josh alluded to, we have not, as a culture or organization, spent a lot of time thinking about how we should spend money and how to organize it in a way that it's effective. Case in point, multiple times a day, week, or year, people come up, can I have X number of dollars for this? Just out of the blue. My first question is, did you budget for it? Where's this money coming from? So changing that culture is huge, because on the front end we're saying, what is it that you need? Well, how much money do we have? Let's make sure that we're measuring what we're spending and how much it's creating the outcomes we want to see, and therefore forcing folks to plan and get ahead of what they want to spend, so they don't come in April and May and say, I need X number of dollars for this initiative. So we want to improve our budgeting process. Josh and I and team have actually had some initial conversations, and our next step is have just a budgeting, how we're going to talk to our departments around budgeting before we move on, because that will only make us better and more efficient. Review school staffing. This is also something that wasn't a practice. In years past, I think teachers were just allocated to schools, but they weren't necessarily aligned to the number of scholars that were in a building. So if you had 300 kids one year and you had 25 teachers, Clary, cover your ears. If you had 200 kids the next year, you somehow had the same 25 teachers, versus every year reevaluating your enrollment so you can staff appropriately. And in many cases, I think staff was just added when asked. Right? And so there's really no model of how we've staffed schools, and so we're going to go through that this spring. For that reason, we want to invest in a personnel audit, which we're going to invest in. I fundamentally believe we have some challenges with our past HR practices and how we've brought people into our system, and we need to look at it. Will it potentially cost us $50,000 like MAP, but you saw the savings that it will create for us, and it will create for us on the purchase service side. I think the same thing will happen on the personnel side. Partnering with our partners, identifying those partners that will attach the work that we'll do, and then securing philanthropic dollars from our community. Given we realize money will not, we're not getting more. If anything, we're get less over time. So how do we fill that gap? So that will be the hat that I will start to wear. So I will be reaching out to many folks to figure out how we can fill the gap where it is needed to support the work that needs to get done, given everything that you've seen.
And so, Mr. Hardy, I do, again, obviously, as a commission, we don't necessarily oversee the kind of operational side of the work, obviously, but I do think it's important to, and again, this isn't you need to do this, it's just a recommendation, to really think about this personnel audit. I think that it's going to be really important that we start looking at not only how we attract talent, but are we using data to inform the talent that we need to bring into our district. And so it gets away from personal bias, and it gets more focused on the needs of the district based upon data-informed decisions, not anecdotal, qualitative, but truly, and qualitative is part of it, right? So I mean, there are narratives and stories that need to be told that can drive decision-making, but I would really highly recommend that piece, just because we're thinking about this promise and the Lorain promise that is, and I think a plan is a plan, right? But without the right personnel and the right people on that team, you can't drive it, right? And so I just think that's something that I would, again, highly recommend, and if it's within the scope of where you all think it needs to be accomplished, then we as a commission, or as a chair of the commission, I can't speak for individuals on the commission, I think it's something that you should totally consider.
Duly noted, and I just made eye contact with our chief people officer, who's all over it. So it's exciting to hear. But nonetheless, definitely something we are considering, and appreciate that the validation that is a priority.
David,
Yes.
I applaud the support that you're giving to the individual buildings. So academically and non-academically, I can see your vision. But as a teacher, like, what is the staffing looking like? What are our class sizes looking like for next year? Because I know one thing that is extremely helpful to teachers is a manageable class size. So what's that shaking out to be?
Yeah.
And before you answer that, just because as a non-educator, like, what is a manageable class size, John? Like, how many kids would that be?
Yeah, so there are state guidelines that outline the number of scholars per teacher, which again we'll abide by, and in any way if I can reduce that, I will. I won't expand above that number for whatever grade level or size that is. That's just not the goal. I do think there are some pain points that have been brought to me by some school leaders around the wonderful environment that pre-K classrooms have with the support they have, and then the transition to kindergarten. Those numbers and that support isn't as strong. So we're reevaluating what that could look like as an example. But as we go through that school staffing piece, which again I think is a large undertaking because we haven't done a ton of that in the past, we'll find out a better answer. And you'll see in upcoming newsletters and town halls, I'll speak to these recommended next steps in the progress we're making, because I think that's a huge question. But I want to be clear, those numbers, the manageable number or the ratio that is recommended by the state will be abided by, and we're not going to see, classrooms of 37, 38 outside of the scope of what the state says is considered manageable.
And as a follow-up to that great point you just made, I guess for around course offerings, one of the things that we at our foundation look at when we're working with schools is, you talk about this achievement gaps is not just within district, but as you look at other districts. I mean, are we offering AP courses? Can our kids compete? I was just watching the shooting down there in Florida, and how eloquently those students were able to articulate themselves from that AP history, AP Gov honors courses. And I'm thinking to myself, our kids don't even have that opportunity, right? So when we start talking about achievement gaps, and we're not putting rigorous curriculum in front of our students.
But we do have CCP courses, so I don't want to diminish those in the scope of things as well.
So
because we have some excellent scholars, students that are a part of that program that take college courses here at the high school, and they're phenomenal students. So I don't want it to seem as if we don't offer those here in Lorain City School.
So you offer AP courses, or
well, we offer CCP, which is the equivalent of them taking a community college course from LCC on campus here in our building.
And so, and to that point, I guess what I was getting at is how APs are nationally recognized in standard.
But at the same time, I almost feel like don't discount the CCP program.
And that's not what I was doing, sir.
It just kind of seems.
I was just saying in terms of course offerings, right? That I did notice that the students, they were taking AP courses, and I was just wondering if the district offered those courses.
Well, we are going to be next year, correct, Mr. Hardy?
Right. So I think the's two things. I think we're going to be offering both, right? So
Right,
I think
correct.
I think the work that is done not only through our CCP courses, we're expanding that umbrella, creating an early college academy where we'll have both seats here and also at LC to provide those rigorous courses. But we also realized for our kids that don't choose that pathway and want rigorous coursework, we traditionally have not had that over the past few years, and we're looking to expand that as well. So we didn't have any AP courses. Next year we'll have 4.
Yes. And so, and again, this is the non-educator speaking here. So with the CCP courses, if a student were to take CCP and wanted to take the AP exam because the 4-year college university I want to attend gives me credit or allows me to jump a grade, a course level, if I take the AP exam and score well on it, do you think that's a comparable curriculum that would prepare kids to take the AP exam if they were interested in that?
That I don't know, because I don't teach AP, and I don't want to comment on something that I don't teach.
Okay.
I do know that our students who have, I mean, we've had students that have transferred into this district from other districts that have gone on and have reported back that they were thankful that they took what they did here because it propelled them, and they're doing very well in college.
How many students would you say are in that CCP program?
I don't have,
Yeah.
Mrs. Haney would have those numbers as far as the program. I know for me personally, as a CCP educator, I have a full load. I mean,
Yeah.
and I have 30 students, my class load, and it's expanding. I mean, and the kids are taking advantage of these programs. And like Mr. Hardy said, we're adding more next year through the college. So we're trying to create those opportunities for our students.
Absolutely.
And I think we're doing a great job of doing that. And I think the program is a very solid, good program for our students academically.
I think the components of that, so around 350 to 400 of our scholars participate in CCP from our incoming 9th grade class through 12th grade. And those numbers will start to increase as we rebuild and kind of establish a deeper commitment to our early college academy. The same with, to your original question around the options and course options that are given to kids. We want, again, that is a sizable chunk of individuals that are in our school that take CCP courses or be working toward an associate's degree. However, there's still a significant number of others who need other options. So having an arts academy where there will be rigorous coursework and opportunities to explore everything from digital arts to performing arts, to a STEM academy that will focus on a lot of the skills that will be demanded in 21st century jobs, to having an honor society with AP courses. So we're starting with 4 next year and expanding that every year so kids can participate in that. And the list goes on. So I think one of the big messages I heard from kids, and I think of one in particular, and I mentioned her name way too much, so I won't mention it now, but she has articulated the desire to want more. And more than anything else, we have to provide it for our kids.
And I can tell you, Mr. Richardson, when you compare like what we offer more opportunities in CCP at least than most other districts do.
Absolutely.
And I can speak for that as a parent who
Absolutely.
is really having a daughter who's in high school in another district right now that doesn't have the opportunities here.
That's amazing.
And comparative to my other daughter who graduated from here, Taylor,
Yeah.
is it's night and day.
Absolutely.
So we are impressive in that regard.
Any other questions about that? There's probably two more that might be surrounding this, but I wanted to see if there are any questions around those recommendations and thoughts.
This is great.
Okay. The last piece, just wanted to speak to, we were just trying to go so you all can see like where all of this information is warehoused and the things that are posted. Elena, are you able to? If not, if you minimize that and just go to LorainCitySchools.org. Technology. It's going to work with us one day, I promise.
Is this what you want to see?
It's not posting. That's why, up there. It's not reflected on the. It may, so it looks like, Elena, it might be on your screen, but it's not showing up on the big screen.
Oh,
You want to hit escape on the PowerPoint, see if that allows you to minimize.
no. I did minimize it.
Okay, it's not working.
Yeah.
Okay. So nonetheless, if you have a chance or have a moment, go to LorainSchools.org and you'll see the first thing that pops up is a wonderful young child smiling with the Lorain Promise next to her. And if you click on more, it'll take you to not only all of our documents, our town halls, the monthly updates that I provide with TB20. You will see all of the public information requests that we receive. So we receive a number of them. And so we created a tab to give you all the information that has ever been asked for by any individual within the district. We pose the question and our response. And so that information is there so that if there ever is a question of, well, individuals are not getting information, if they have put a public information request to us within as fast as we can, we try to post it. Some of them take a little bit longer. For example, if there's a request for 1,000 emails, we have to kind of collate those. And it takes a little bit of time, but we will post those. And if there's any question around, the partners, and I apologize, John, I was hoping that you could see that. The partners that we're potentially selecting, you'll see the proposal, you'll see the contract, you'll see the cost. All of that information is right there. And if there's ever a question, there are times either at town halls, if you want to talk to me one-on-one, if you want to have coffee with me, I will make time to do that. I know I owe that to a few individuals, but in all seriousness, there's nothing that we will not share. And because we want to do this right, we want to do it together. So I appreciate you all being here. This was a lengthy conversation, but I think it was one that hopefully provided the information that this esteemed commission needed so that we can proceed forward. Any final questions?
I have a final question. In light of the national issue of school shootings,
Yeah.
have we done anything different? Are we confident that we're doing all we can to make sure our schools are safe?
Great question, and I'm not sure if everyone in the audience heard it, so I'm going to try to paraphrase, if that's okay. The question around, the national conversation around gun violence in schools that stemmed from not only the shooting in Parkland, Florida, but since January, I think there has been upwards of 16, 17, 18 shootings nationally. Have we done anything about that? So one, a few weeks ago, right after the shooting, I did put a letter out to the community calling out for folks to be a part of a task force that will help us figure out how safe and how we can improve safety. I've had parents, I've had commitments from our police chief. Obviously, folks here have signed up to be a part of that task force. In addition to with the police chief and his staff, we sat down with our chief operations officer and walked through all of the protocols that we currently have in place. The SWAT team was actually here about a week ago walking through the building to make sure our protocols were strong. And then the dialogue around, that's the reactive side. And unfortunately, a lot of gun violence and things like this are unfortunately, really hard to prepare for the way that we all would want to. However, I think the best preparation is proactively creating the school culture we want to see. Where kids see something, they say something, where teachers and scholars work together to build relationships that are trusting, and that there's more love than hate. And so that's what we're looking to build more than anything else. But great question. Thank you, Elena. So up here again, I just wanted to point to this. This is the page. So if you go to loraineschools.org, the first thing that pops up is the TLP page with that wonderful young lady. And on the left-hand side, you will see our budget, our CEO approved agenda. So this is everything that I've approved since I've came on in August. And you can actually see it by every 2 weeks. It's there. Everything that's ever approved from, I think there was a DJ for a dance at Southview this past couple of weeks. I missed it somehow. I don't know how that didn't get on my calendar. To the more substantial things from the operational standpoint that we need to function as a school district, paper, pens, everything is there. A monthly newsletter that goes out every month to the school board, to the commission, and then to the community at large is posted every single month. March will get up there soon. We just sent that out. The engagement calendar, everything that you will see myself or a member of the chief team at is located on this calendar. We also have survey results from our community. One survey that is not up there yet, but we also took a survey of our turnaround principal candidates to get feedback on their experience during the day, and that's in your folder as well. And again, if anyone wants to see those results, we can make them available, but they were very, very positive. To the new chief announcement, to potential partners. If we can click on that, I want to see, John, I actually am very curious to see if that's actually posted up there. So you'll see all the potential partners, and we started to align them by elements that we wanted to see to our commitments as we got on further in the year. But Schoolzilla's proposal is there, and it should open up to the actual, should open up to the PDF. We'll correct that. But nonetheless, if you, can you click on Panorama? I just want to see if theirs pops up. Maybe there's some other error. Yeah. Okay. There might be just a larger error. And if you all in the audience, if you have a chance to click on it, let us know, because I want to get that fixed. But nonetheless, if you were to go there, you would see the actual proposal and numbers. I'm not quite sure why they didn't post. But you will also find, again, our survey results from our teachers, how we're prioritizing our priorities, video update. I mean, it's all there. I won't go down the whole list for you because there's a lot there. But again, if you don't, Netflix and chill, just go to our Lorain Schools page instead, and you could get everything you ever want. You can binge on the Lorain Promise. It's www.loraineschools.org/TLP. Yes.
Can I make a comment?
You sure can.
Okay. I just have two things I want to make a comment on. I'd like to say that I am disappointed that Mr. Hardy's relationship with the Board of Ed has not improved over his time here in Lorain. And as an optimist,
I'm sorry, as a point of order, can we get down the agenda and during public comment?
okay, I didn't know if I was free to speak at this time, or?
Yeah, can we just kind of can we just stick to the agenda?
Sure.
And then you can obviously, absolutely discuss those
That's
things.
fine.
Okay?
That's fine.
So, and just, again, staying, as a point of order and staying on sort of, sticking to our agenda here, I don't know if Mr. Hardy was done with the instructional updates?
Yes, that was the last piece.
So we're going to move along to the CEO evaluation piece.
Sure, that's fine.
And then we're going to have public comment after that, and then we can lay it out, okay?
My apologies.
No worries. No, this is great. We've been in talks with so thank you to the Ohio Department of Education. We've been in talks with the the director of the Office of Educator Effectiveness Center for the teaching professions, and actually have a call tomorrow where we're going to be building the evaluation for our CEO. As you know, the state of Ohio doesn't have sort of the CEO. This is a new sort of journey as a state, and so we have the superintendent's evaluation, and so we're going to be driving that because obviously I think it's really important that we evaluate our leadership, and it's not about, like to your point, Mr. Hardy, about I got yous. It's like we want you to be a part of this so that, we're learning together, but also we're professionals and we're also holding each other accountable. And I think as an ADC, we owe that to not just our statutory duty, but also to the community in which we serve. And I think in terms of the culture of evaluation, it starts at the top, right? So if we evaluating our CEO and holding our CEO accountable, we want to make sure as a district, that's the culture of the district, right? So he's not exempt. And I just want that to be on the record. Again, the CEO will have an evaluation, and we will roll that out maybe midsummer, and we will have a community conversation around it. We don't have all the specifics or the logistics right now because we're actually building the tool. And I think as more districts think about distress, I think Lorain's taking a leadership role in creating that tool so Youngstown can use it in other districts that may go into distress and moving forward. So are there any comments from the commission, anything you all want to add? And I do have a PowerPoint that I was sent today, just sort of laying out what this may look like, and I'll forward it to commission members after the meeting. And if there aren't any questions, we can move to the public comment. And back to the...
Just one quick point of order. Do you want to introduce our new legal counsel?
Absolutely. So our new legal counsel, is your role assistant? Anthony,
Yes,
Mr.
Assistant Attorney General.
Assistant Attorney General, the Education Section of the Ohio Attorney General's Office, Mr. Anthony Ferris, is representing the Lorain Academic Distress Commission, as well as the Youngstown Academic Distress Commission. So, as a point of order, and so that we understand his role, again, he's not representing the CEO or Lorain City School District, he's representing the ADC, right? And so, he's our attorney. You all remember Jim Miller, his predecessor. So Mr. Ferris has stepped in and will work with us and will be present at our quarterly meetings as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. And if there aren't any other discussions around the evaluation of the CEO, we want to move to public comment. You want to step up, state your name for the record and your address, and then we're going to also have Mr. Cawthon's going to speak as well, but we wanted the public to speak. And I think it's important that, because I read the newspapers, and I know, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Bobby Surgeon.
Bobby, no, the woman behind you, I'm sorry. Ms. Johnson's here, she represents the school board, and so I know there's been discussion around information and access to information, and I think as an adult, right, I think it's important that we lay things out, that we don't shoot through the media. I think we're in the room tonight, and if there are things or items, when we talk about lack of information, we designed this meeting to lay out every piece of information that we had, and if you feel as though that's not suffice, please let us know, and we can get whatever information you need or the school board needs, because we believe that this district can only be successful if we're all partnering together as adults first, as professionals second, and doing what's best for our scholars. And we need a strong school board involved in that, right? So let us know what you need.
Hello. Again, Bobby Surgeon, 918 Oberlin Avenue.
one of the things that I just heard recently, and I just wanted to find out if this is true or not, is that 6th grade band has been cut. So as an advocate for the band boosters, you know, that's something that I think is so important, because long-term down the road, that's going to have an effect on student education. It's going to have an effect on the high school band. You know, they have been out getting great exposure for the high school, the city, you know, the Puerto Rican National Day Parade. They did the Detroit Thanksgiving Day Parade. They're getting invitations for Chicago again. So I think it's something that is hugely important. I know I grew up in a very different Lorain. Times were different economically, but we had the option of starting an instrument in 4th grade. For band, we could start an orchestra instrument in 3rd grade. So obviously we were very blessed that we had those opportunities. I think that's so important. You know, you look at last year's graduating class, I know for sure the valedictorian was a member of the band and orchestra. The salutatorian, I'm pretty sure, was a member of both as well. So any study you look at shows that kids in arts, you know, whether it be band, orchestra, choir, painting, art students tend to typically do so much better academically, and I just think it's a hugely important thing. Another issue that I want to address is that I find it amazing that teachers are not valued in this community and in this country. These are educated professionals who have gone to school to do a job, and so when we talk about, like, we need to retrain teachers how to teach, did they not learn how to teach in college? Are colleges and universities in America not doing their job in teaching teachers how to teach? I just don't feel like we put the value and the appreciation on these educators. You know, they do recertifications in the summers. I mean, I just don't understand it. You know, the other third and final point that I would like to make is that, you know, this whole thing, like, now we're evaluating the budget constantly. As an older returning student in public administration, yes, absolutely, we should be mindful of every single resource we have in this district, and we should be making sure that we get the most out of every dollar that we have, every book that we have. That should be a constant, and it should have been for a long time. We've had financial problems in this district. We know there's been waste, and that has to stop for these children's sake. And I will quote one of my favorites, Tom Tucker. You know, when he was superintendent, this is about doing right by these children and their education. Okay, the adult egos need to get put to the side. The bickering, the squabbling needs to stop. You know, all of you have to work with the board, because the board has control over this renewal levy, and we need this renewal levy to pass. So all the adult egos on every side need to go to the side, and let's do what's right for these kids. Also, I have to run back downstairs because I'm helping sell apparel for the Titans. So when you leave the meeting, come down to Family Fest, get your shirt for Friday night's game. Let's get the community out there and support this team and these kids, because they're doing phenomenal.
So before I turn it over to Mr. Hardy, I just want to thank you for coming and asking those questions and expressing sort of your passion for Lorain City Schools and our community, number one, Mr. Sturgeon. Thank you for that. And number two, I think it's important that we take notice as a community that when you hear these things, you come to the venue and ask the question, right? This is what we're hoping to accomplish through our town hall meetings, through our academic distress commission meetings, so that rumors don't permeate throughout our community, and we address them, we put them to bed, and we move on.
Right.
So thank you for stepping up and using this venue as a way to communicate to your leaders in your district.
Well, and you know, the other thing too is that, you know, people who don't have students or children in the district or in the city, you know, it's this whole like, oh, well, what goes on doesn't affect me. Yes, it does. We are all going to get old, and we all need educated, caring professionals to take care of us someday. So whatever goes on in this district does affect all of us. You don't have to have students in this district. You know, you think, oh, I don't have to go vote yes for this renewal levy because I don't have kids. It affects the value of your home. It affects us in every single way, and people need to understand that yes, everything that goes on in this city impacts us. So these kids are the future, and they deserve the best.
Agreed. Okay. Before you run, I do want to thank you. Honestly, it speaks to not only the importance of this issue to you, but many other folks that hopefully step to the mic and have a similar conversation with. So thank you. I want to answer your 3 points, if that's okay. First and foremost, it breaks my heart to hear the feeling of not being valued. I fundamentally believe that if we're ever going to do anything great for kids, it starts with making sure our teachers feel
Well,
valued.
I'm not a teacher, but I have friends who are teachers in this district,
I
and they
understand.
love these kids. They are so passionate. They're an advocate for these kids. And I'm stepping up for my teacher friends to
I
say,
understand.
we need to value them.
Absolutely.
We have to value them
Absolutely.
and what they do.
I completely agree, 110% agree. And I think in some of even our one-on-one conversations when we talk about the value and the importance, and again, as a teacher, what is it that, you know, would help our teachers feel valued? And I don't think it's just a conversation between the two of us. It's a conversation that we want to invite all of our teachers to, hence the evolution of our Human Resource Office to a Chief People Office that will focus on that, what it means to be valued. But that's a longer-term fix. In the short term, again, not only you, but anyone that wants to talk to us about what that means for them and what valued means, I would openly invite that meeting to be added to my calendar as many times as necessary to get to a solution and, more importantly, act on the words that we're talking about, because I 110% agree. As far as the rumor around band being eliminated, that's not true. And I appreciate you bringing it, because these type of things come up all the time. I've had zero conversations around the elimination of band in any way. If any way, I actually, you know, I applaud Mr. Civic and the high school band. I mean, they're fantastic. They were here at 4:30 this morning. They were on TV because of the great things that they do for our kids. If anything, we're actually trying to figure out how to backwards map it so that we can expand our reach to band and the arts earlier on, because we fundamentally believe if you can create a passion and an interest in the kid earlier, they're going to come to school every single day. And they're going to develop that skill and really become the wonderful band scholars that we see today. So I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, if we could
That's
definitely start 5th grade, 4th grade, I mean, it gives them more time to prepare.
Absolutely. And it was actually a comment, too, from a 5th grade teacher at Admiral King a few weeks ago who brought that very notion up. And still remember the moment at our lunch bunch meeting where he brought that up, and I wanted to not only speak to it, but we're cultivating that through one of our committees of what that looks like as we backwards map that all the way down to our younger grades. And lastly, I think is an interesting topic around the communication between the school and myself. I fundamentally absolutely open up conversation, would love to have conversation with board members. What I want us to guard against is the role of the school board and the role of the CEO, and the role of the board is different than that of the CEO. However, I am again open to conversation with members of the board, and in some I have conversations with. Others I've invited to conversations and I have not received a response. And I know that's probably been said at other meetings held by the school board, but again, I invite anyone who would like to read my emails to see the requests have been made, and I haven't received
And one thing that I give you credit for, I really give you a lot of credit for this now, is that everything is there online. We have access to all this information, so we don't have to have these myths or rumors or whatever. You know, so much is right there for you to go on and read yourself, and I give you a lot of credit for that, because we do need that transparency. That is so critical, that people know what's actually going on.
I appreciate that.
So-
Thank you so very much, sir. I really appreciate your support to our district.
Yeah, thank you for the time, and like I said, come down and get your shirts and support the team.
Great, great, thank you.
Any other questions from the public or concerns, and then we'll turn it over to the commission to.
My name is Yvonne Johnson. I'm the newest member of the board. It is wonderful to be the newest member. Do you know why? I don't have a hidden agenda. I don't want to be anything except a member of the board and help the children do better. So I don't want to go on and try to be the commissioner. I don't want to go on and be anything else but what I am, and that's Yvonne Johnson, and that's a member of the board. Now, if the board has changed, since I am new, I'm not stuck in that rut that I've got to have all of the power and I've got to know all of the policy. If my CEO says I need to come to a community meeting so I can find out what's going on, I come to the community meeting. All I can say is, for me, all I want is better for our scholars. I want them to feel like I did. When I went to Admiral King, I was so happy to get here. You could not believe what a wonderful place I thought this place was and how we respected the teacher. So all I'm going to say is this: the engineer of democracy is compromise.
And so really quickly, Ms. Johnson, just for the record, you're a member of the Lorain City School Board?
Yes, this board here.
Okay, and as a follow-up, so again, in just having communication, because I'm a big fan of communication, I noticed that there was a no confidence vote at the school board meeting of the CEO, and you voted in favor of the majority.
You can't believe everything that you read.
Okay, so for our purposes, and since we have this forum, the commission is here, can you explain to us as a commission, what did that entail and how did the vote, like what is that about? No confidence, can you explain that so that we are aware?
There are some of us that have all the confidence in the world in our CEO. There are other of us because they're in a political, personal fight with the CEO, and they seem to have more power than perhaps a new person like I do. They know who to talk to. They know how to engineer things in a different direction to keep up the turmoil. And they know people on the newspaper, and they know how to present it other ways than we do. Now, let me tell you what happened.
Okay.
Since you want to know.
I want to know.
Okay. I was at that meeting, and I thought I was there before, during, and after. And I said, what happened to the lady that came up, Mrs. Smith, and she said Friendship Baptist has adopted Washington School because they have 48 Hispanic young people over there and families. She talked about that. We talked about how wonderful the band was. We talked about how wonderful our coach was and the assistant coach and how proud we were of that. We talked about being #1 without any the weapons that were talked about, that we're #1. We are #1. I got the paper and I said, what happened to all that good information that we gave out? We even talked about Mr. Pye. Well, we gave a big banquet for him. And people came from all over because he has done some wonderful artwork for us, and he still is working. And he's a phenomenal person. And I wanted to know what happened to that. I also mentioned at another...
I'm sorry, when you say what happened to that, what do you mean?
What happened that we did not give him any accolades at the Board of Education. We acted as if he did not exist. So I brought that up. I said, because I'm that type of person that Mr. Graham, Dr. Graham, he should not have to put a little note in the newspaper that he's leaving, that we should do as an adult, give him a banquet, a luncheon, and say goodbye. I didn't understand why we don't do that. You see, all I want is to act like an adult. And this is not happening with our board. But I cannot do it by myself. Mr. Sturgill cannot do it by himself.
So let me ask you this question as well, because I think this is really important that we have this dialogue as a community on the record, where it's being televised for people at home to kind of come in and be a part of that discussion, and as well as the media, our friends in the media. And I just wanted to ask a question in terms of, you know, this lack of information that I read about in the newspapers. And again, we wanted to frame this entire agenda around the things that we're hearing or reading about, and make sure that we were being transparent, because we know that these things are on a website. So as a school board member and working with the school board, can you specifically lay out exactly what information we're talking about? I'm reading in the newspaper about spending, and you know, we look at the data, we bring in our Mr. Hill here, and we see a reduction in central office administrators, we see a reduction in cost. And so let's have a real discussion about it and lay it out so that people are informed. We have a duty to inform our community. So when you say you don't have information, can you explicitly lay out what you're talking about so that we can share it to Mr. Hardy and he can give it to the community?
I have all the information I need. That was one of the first things that I said about Mr. Hill. I said, boy, I love the way you give out the budget. I love the way when all of our teachers were sick and they were going to have an skewed budget, how he went back and found another consortium to put us in and save us money. We talked about that. I tell him all the time, the way you give the budget is a fantastic thing. But what we got sometimes is skewed when you say, oh my goodness, he almost spent $1 million on how many people? Okay, that sometimes skews what you see.
Right.
And what you hear.
So let me ask you this again.
Let me finish.
Go ahead.
Now, when I saw that there was no faith in the superintendent, you can ask the reporter here. I got in my car and I drove down to Morning Journal. And I said, oh, you don't know me. And you need to get some of this information straightened out, because that's not who I am. And we got that straightened out.
So as again, for the record, again, we have people at home watching. I just got an interesting email from a good friend of mine who worked in the district, who's now in Boston. By the way, said he's really impressed with you as a CEO. I wanted to be on the record so that it's clear. Do you feel, in your personal capacity as a school board member, that you have the requisite information you need financially to put a renewal levy on the ballot?
Absolutely. I never had any doubt about it.
Thank you. Thank you. Additional questions from the public?
The board's been after all the public.
I'm sorry. Can you also state your name and address?
Nancy, 1604 West 20th Street, Lorain, Ohio. The board, since he started on, I asked them, because they were asking for, saying they didn't get any information from Dr. Hardy. And I asked the board, what do you want from him? What are you looking for? They would not tell me what they were looking for. They started right after he was hired. What they started off with your procedure, all the information, how you got to pick him. They've been on this journey since day one, because I've been asking the same questions. What are you looking for from this man? What information do you want? Then they come up with the community wants to know. Then we were talking about the budget. What are you looking, what do you need from the man was sitting right there, ask him. But they will not tell you what they're looking for. They will not tell the people in the public meeting what they're looking for. So I went online, the request, is that some of the things that the board was asking for? When I looked at all that information, he has work to do. He has not time to, I mean, if you look at those requests, you're going to say, what in the world? You give me that from the board. See how long it takes you to get it. He just got here. He doesn't have time for all the little dumb stuff you asking for. Emails, telephone calls. Look at it. It's ridiculous. The boards, there's something wrong with them. I don't know what it is, but I am sick and tired of them skating around and trying to mess with this man right here, because he's doing an excellent job.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other from the community?
Yes, may I also say too, that one of the things that we
Can you state your name and address again?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Rhoda Lee, 1904 West 22nd Street. And here is my president of in the NAACP and the conversation. And the one thing that that Ms. Johnson discussed that we didn't talk about was the levy. And we met and we have a meeting with Josh on the 3rd. Members of this community to meet with them and to let the board know in no uncertain terms that we, the community, want that levy and we want it on the ballot and we want to know what we have to do to get it there.
And let me ask you this, is the media available or are they invited to that meeting?
They're fine.
Public meeting? Okay.
Yes.
Public meeting.
E. Jean Rice, 1034 MLK Boulevard, 21st Street, and also president of Lorain and AACP. We are the people that honored Jeff. I sent a letter and a note to our school board members. They even said at first they were coming. We had a table reserved. No one except Yvonne showed up. Jeff Pye's been in the school system over 30 years.
I know.
And it's embarrassing. Now, that little note I was showing, I've been on vacation. It should have been what we said about them. That little note they had in the paper, because you know what? They're playing games. They're politically involved, which should have no place when it comes to our children. That's the whole thing. I'm just sick and tired of all the play-in games that they're doing. And I wish it was some kind of law or something that we could do, just give them a rest. Put new people in their place to the time is, I'm serious. If you don't want to be a school board member, say you don't want to be one and go someplace, we'll find somebody. It's really getting out of hand and it's embarrassing.
Well, I do.
I'm ashamed of their leadership in the city. What is it about?
So I do think it's important, again, from the chair of this commission, I think is that it's really important that if anyone in the public needs information, any person, that we turn that information over. That's our duty as public, officials. And so again, to anyone out there, to the media, to the school board, our friends that may be within the district, whoever, if you need information, I know Mr. Hardy has really gone above and beyond to extend information and make himself available to have those conversations. And if possible, I would like to put a rest or an end to these issues around information, because I think it's unfair in that, we have to have these discussions and take up this much time when it's about, adults that's sitting down having a conversation.
Yes,
right?
and they don't attend any of his meetings. So they're playing games.
Well, in their defense, I did see Mark Battle at a town hall. I saw Ms. Johnson at town hall, and I also saw Mr. Sturgill at town hall.
Mr. Sturgill.
He was here this evening.
Yeah, he was here.
He was here.
But your president.
Who's president?
Yup.
She's not talking about you.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My favorite person.
I'm sorry. So if there aren't any other questions from the public, we'd like to turn it over to members of the commission. I know Mr. Kaufman has a prepared statement, and if you want to give that statement. Sure.
I was thinking they didn't want me to talk at all tonight, but.
Oh, no.
Okay, as I was going to say, I would like to say that I am disappointed that Mr. Hardy's relationship with the Board of Education has not improved over his time here in Lorain. As an optimist, I hold out hope that in some fashion a level of diplomacy can be bridged, and that the board and Mr. Hardy can cultivate a relationship that will allow both to excel in accomplishing the tasks of improving Lorain City Schools and the placement of a renewal levy on the ballot that would benefit all of our students and the community. Okay. I would also, and some of you have stolen my thunder with this, but I wanted to acknowledge some of the great things that Lorain City Schools has been doing recently. The Longfellow robotics team, which will be competing in Louisville in April in a world competition against 42 different countries with the top 180 middle school teams. The Lorain High Drama Department and Wendy Hall and her students for their recent performance of High School Musical 2. The JROTC and Lieutenant Colonel Owen for taking first place in the unarmed competition at Fort Knox, which is the equivalent of winning a state championship in a sport. Lorain High varsity cheerleaders and advisor Christian Calhoun for their qualifying for the OASAA state competitions in Columbus. Tim Civic and the Lorain High Titans Marching Band on their appearance this morning on Channel 3 News Today. I DVR'd it because I was not up at 5, but I did catch some blips of that. Today, Dan Blatt and Kevin Goodwin for putting on an amazing Unified Special Olympics basketball tournament today at Lorain High School. And people that came said this was a phenomenal event that was put on by Lorain City Schools. I was a part of it as the announcer. I had a blast. It was great seeing the kids out there. It was phenomenal. And the kids that came in and watched it was just a great thing. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention John Rossitano and his coaching staff for doing a great job with our young men and advancing to the Final Four in Columbus this Friday at 5:15 at the Schottenstein Center. As a lifelong educator in the district and the voice of the Titans, it is with great pride that I boast about our young men and what they have accomplished. The last time a Lorain City Schools team has advanced to the Final Four was the 1988 Admiral King team. And going back even further, there's a great story in today's Morning Journal about the 1923 Lorain High team that won the first official state championship in boys basketball in Ohio. Our 2018 version, advancing to the Final Four, has achieved a major accomplishment for Lorain High School, Lorain City Schools, and the city of Lorain. Everyone should be exceptionally proud of these Titans. This event and the success of our young scholars, athletes, reinforces the support and pride the staff and the people of this community share as one of a Lorain family and as stakeholders in their success. Whether it is appropriate or not in our society, sports is a unifying component of our culture, and this moment will be one in which will be talked about for generations to come, and will most likely someday land these scholar athletes in the Lorain Sports Hall of Fame. Great job to all those involved and those who have supported Lorain City School successes. Remember, we are all Titans. I'm done.
So moving along here on our agenda, we're going to, I don't think we have any items to discuss in executive session. We do like to keep this on the agenda in case we need to go into executive session prior to the meeting. So it's always good to have it on there. So we're going to skip that agenda item. And we will go to, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second?
Second?
Voice vote?
Mr. Coffin?
Yes.
Mr. Monteleone?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Richardson?
Yes.
Dr. Solis?
Yes.
Meeting over, meeting adjourned, and I want to thank you all for coming out. Thank you.
This has been a production of Lorain City Schools TV 20 WLCS.